Let's talk about Pete Carroll, though, because Pete Carroll, it was announced today that he would not be returning as the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. Quite a surprising move. The Nick Saban thing, there was at least talk with Seattle. We didn't hear any rumblings, which I guess, hey, props to the Seahawks for keeping things under wraps. That's what good organizations tend to do. But nonetheless, Pete Carroll will not be the Seahawks head coach in 2024 or moving forward. And let's see, Jody Allen, the owner of the Seahawks, put out a statement. She said, after thoughtful meetings and careful consideration for the best interest of the franchise, we have amicably agreed with Pete Carroll that his role will not evolve from head coach to remain with the organization as an advisor. Pete is the winningest coach in Seahawks history, brought the city its first Super Bowl title, and created a tremendous impact over the past 14 years on the field and in the community. His expertise in leadership and building a championship culture will continue as an integral part of our organization moving forward. Pete will always be a beloved member of the Seahawks family. So Pete is going to move to being an advisor for the Seahawks. I don't know if this is part-time advisor. I don't know if he's going to be one of the guys making personnel decisions. I'm not sure what that's going to be, what his role is going to be. What I do know is this, and I find it a bit curious. I watched Pete Carroll's press conference today. Didn't seem like he wanted to leave. This felt like it was ownership seeking to move on from Pete Carroll. And Pete Carroll, before we move any further, let's talk about his resume with the Seattle Seahawks because it's pretty darn strong. 136-89-1 record, won a Super Bowl. And again, as the statement by Jody Allen said, he's the winningest head coach in the history of the Seattle Seahawks. Here's why I don't get them moving on. Reportedly, according to Schefter, Ian Rappaport, all these sources, the leading candidate to be the Seahawks head coach is Dan Quinn, the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, who was the defensive coordinator for the Seahawks under Pete Carroll during the Legion of Boom era. He eventually would leave to be the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. I don't get it. Because in bringing in Dan Quinn to replace Pete Carroll, you're basically just hiring a younger version of Pete. Like, generally, when you move on from a head coach, it's just like when you break up. It's like when you move on from your ex. Oftentimes, it's just in our psychology, whatever the case may be, we often end up with somebody who's maybe not the complete opposite of the person we were with, but very different from the person we were with. Because it's like, man, there's qualities about this person, revisionist history, obviously, but there's qualities like I wish I would have had a different partner, and you move on to the next one, and then there's qualities in them that maybe the other person had, vice versa. I don't really get it in that regard. Dan Quinn is kind of Pete Carroll 2.0. High-energy guy, very smart defensive coordinator and coach in general. The Cowboys have been very successful since Dan Quinn has been the DC there. He was a good head coach, got a team to the Super Bowl, and did something right. Got to the playoffs again in 2017, won a playoff game before they lost to the eventual champion Eagles. Not saying Dan Quinn isn't a good head coach candidate. Wouldn't be shocked at all if he gets a job. I think he should get a job. Evidently, Jerry Jones has paid him something to keep him in Dallas because I'm surprised he hasn't been gone long before this. But aren't you kind of maintaining the exact same sort of culture, which isn't a bad thing, but oftentimes when you fired somebody, you want somebody different. I don't know. That's kind of the thing for me that's very confusing about this whole situation, is the fact that Pete didn't seem to want to move on, and Seattle's basically just hiring a younger version of Pete in Dan Quinn. It feels like they're in a little bit of a space that can be very, very dangerous in sports, and that's romanticizing the past. Dan Quinn was there, defensive coordinator, Legion of Booms, one of the greatest defenses we've ever seen. Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, Bobby Wagner, all those guys, future Hall of Famers. And it's like they're trying to bring the glory days back to a certain extent while moving on from the kind of the head and the architect of this entire thing in Seattle. It's it's confusing to me in that regard, that you're firing Pete, who didn't seem to want to be fired. If you watch his press conference today, wouldn't be shocked if he continues coaching. He is, I believe, Pete Carroll's 75 years old. I could be wrong on that. I want to make sure I confirm that. Pete Carroll, about mid-70s. He's the oldest coach in the NFL. Now that title belongs to Bill Belichick. I'm sorry. I apologize to Pete Carroll. I said he was much older than he is. I sincerely apologize, Pete. Pete Carroll is 72, is going to be 73 this September. Pete is a high-energy guy. He's 72, acts like he's 42. And you have a situation where he didn't want to leave, but you're just getting a Pete who's about 20 years younger or so, and Dan Quinn. So it feels like they kind of want the best of both sides. Keep a little bit of the past, but also moving on. It's a very odd space that the Seahawks are in. I didn't think this was anything short of anything of a, or any sort of a disappointing year for Seattle. Obviously, it sucks to not make the playoffs when you made it a year ago, but the fact of the matter is, it's not a shot, but Geno Smith was your quarterback. Drew Lock was your quarterback at one point this season. Like, you dealt with injuries to Geno, and if a couple bounces go your way in games against Dallas and in games against the Rams, you get in the playoffs. Now, I would have moved on to the quarterback position, which I anticipate the Seahawks will probably do. Maybe they're the destination for Justin Fields. We'll see. Or if they draft a guy. But I didn't think that this was a situation where, the message wore thin. Maybe I don't know enough about the situation. Maybe more information will come out as time goes on. But maybe Pete's message was wearing thin. I don't know what's going on there. But I saw it and I was like, that's really, really weird. Nick Saban retiring, shocking, caught us all off guard, but you kind of understand it. Mike Vrabel, who I'm about to talk about, again, this is the All Coaches show today. After knowing what I know now in Tennessee, I kind of get why they split up. This one in Seattle is kind of odd. And what they'll do from here remains to be seen, but strange firing of Pete Carroll. I don't totally get it. I don't totally get it for the Seattle Seahawks, but we'll see how it pans out for him. But shout out to Pete, though. Again, loved all these other coaches, Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh. Shout out to Pete, man. Outstanding career. Seahawks were not exactly looked at as a powerhouse or this wildly respected franchise, and you see what he did. And by the way, you see how Russell looked without Pete Carroll. And someone can say, well, what about Pete without Russ? Well, Pete did get to the playoffs and had back-to-back winning seasons with no Russell Wilson. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.